The Callisto protocol is finally out, and it's not really what I expected. I was very excited for this game, like a lot of people, because of the first two Dead Space games, and this is like the spiritual successor of those, as this game was created by the new team Striking Distance Studios, which is headed by Glenn Schofield, who's the brains behind that franchise back in the day. So now you may be asking, is the game good? Well, the thing is, there's a good game here that I actually enjoyed a lot, but it's not the game I was hoping it would be, as it's somewhat buried underneath stupid design choices in combat, like making the biggest focus of the entire game a terribly designed melee and dodging system, which especially early on is a big mess, combined with a very zoomed in camera field of view. I do not for the life of me understand why they throw 3 to 4 enemies at you at the start of the game with this system, as it's clearly and mainly designed for one enemy at a time with a zoomed in camera. The combat and even the melee does thankfully get better a bit further into the game, as you get used to it as well as start relying more on guns and the awesome ripped out Dead Space gravity glove that you use to toss enemies into big ventilation blades and so on, which for me never got old. You can also upgrade your melee after a bit, so it does more damage, making it so enemies die faster and also making it less spammy. The combat also has the related issue that the enemy variety isn't great throughout the game. It's not the least variety I've ever experienced in a game or anything, but 4 to 5 more enemies overall throughout the game would have been awesome, as well as a few more bosses and variety there too. Going back to the topic of guns, there's a few to find and to choose from that I won't spoil here, but I would have loved if the guns stood out from each other a bit more. Many of the guns are very similar to one another, and I think that's a bit of a lost opportunity to not go for more iconic weapons. Moving on from combat and melee, I do think there's another big issue the game had, at least for me. And that's that it never scared me whatsoever. Yes, I may have been a lot younger and less jaded when I was playing Dead Space back in 2008, but the atmosphere of that game, even to this day, is a lot more eerie and way more dark. Callisto is more of an action game, even more so than Dead Space 2 was, as it feels like it's always lit up a little bit too much, and it even made me go into the brightness setting, forcing it down a lot just to get some of that darker feel back. The game is also insanely linear, with only a few exceptions of an optional path with horrible checkpoint for loot and some enemies. But I would say 90% of the game is a linear corridor, which I honestly don't really mind in games, but I still prefer the exploration to be a bigger part, as one of my favorite aspects of horror games and games in general is exploring with the risk of encountering enemies you may not be ready for, but you still do, because it's worth it for the shiny rewards and discovering new areas. The story of the game is the basic horror B-movie infection at a prison and why is this happening type of plot. I won't go further into that, as I won't spoil it for anyone, but it's passable, with some weak to average writing to push you through the game. The characters are also not great, but I wouldn't call them bad either. The problem is just that we know or learn almost nothing about them. Now onto the visuals and audio. Holy shit, does this game look incredible from a graphics standpoint. It may have the most incredible looking character models in a released video game to date, along with incredible lighting and everything else. It would be hard to find anyone who play this who can say with a straight face that this game is an S tier when it comes to graphics. Something that isn't incredible though is the performance of the PC version, which ran like ass even on my rig, that has a 4090 in it and a 13900K in it. I decided to refund that version after 2 hours for the PS5 version, which I had no issues with except for one crash and some very few minor bugs throughout. Now, it probably sounds like I really didn't like the game, right? Well, truth be told, I really did enjoy it, as I played it for an entire day non-stop on the hardest difficulty while exploring everything, and I really didn't want it to end. It's just frustrating, because the game has some stupid design choices that bothered me a lot, especially during the first few hours, and it's simply not the scary horror game experience I wished it would be. But it's still a good game, with a great atmosphere that I'll cherish a lot. So in closing, the Callisto Protocol is a good game, and mostly a good start to a new IP that I would still highly recommend to any Dead Space and even survival horror fan, even if it's not scary, as it still has some of the same vibes and other similarities. Just go in with the right expectations and I think you can enjoy this game. Now, if the developers take all this feedback to heart from all the reviewers and people online for a sequel, despite the sad mixed reviews, that game has massive potential to be one of the all-time great video games. Thank you for watching and have a good day.
Now let's go finish this.
Where I'm enough for